Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. The first full week of practice in pads is underway, and it's been another week of the NCAA lobbing grenades at Jim Harbaugh and leaking NOA drafts. Joining us in just a few minutes to discuss that and much more will be beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Earlier this week, Will Johnson, Ernest Hausman, and Colston Loveland spent some time with Michigan media. Will and Colston talked about what it feels like to start the season as defending national champions.
Everyone's chasing you, so you are the champion. You are the one that has that trophy. So it's a little more motivation. It's a little different because you're not just chasing it. You're still chasing it, but you're trying to keep it too.
We got to do what we did. We got to come in and work. We got to keep our feet where we're at, right under us, and just day by day. Can't get ahead of ourselves. Can't look for another championship. You know what I'm saying? We got to fall in love with the process.
Ernest Hausman says part of the process this summer is keeping in mind they are not the hunter this year, but the hunted.
Whatever we did last year, we had to tighten up our details even more. We got to practice even harder. All these different things that we can find a way to improve on and make even better is what we're going to have to do to make sure we win another national championship.
All three players were asked to describe fall camp in just 3 words.
A grind, a lifestyle, and passion.
Long, developmental, detailed.
Competitive, fun, grind.
Colston Loveland shared his thoughts on what makes these practices fun.
It's the fun. It's just, with our teammates, all the coaches, it's just straight ball for a month. We don't got to worry about school. We don't got to worry about anything in our personal lives. Kind of let it all go and just worry about ball and becoming the best football player we can be. And so that's super fun.
Will Johnson says the key to having a good camp and getting ready for the season begins with being uncomfortable.
And you just can't get comfortable with anything. You can't get comfortable in meetings. You can't get comfortable at practice. You can't get comfortable thinking down into the future about or in the past. Just keeping it day by day, staying in the moment. That's how you become the best version of yourself, I believe.
Our guest today says the NCAA stuff is not going away anytime soon, and it could be a distraction once again this year. But we should be excited about Team 145 and the fast approaching season. Up next on our Game Day segment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. So stay with us. Joining us on the show this week as we preview the upcoming season and, of course, talk about some other things is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you back with us, Aaron.
Happy August, Mike. Camp's here. Football's around the corner. Like you said, we've got other stuff to discuss, but I'm glad to be back in football mode.
Oh, yeah. We look forward to this for so long. Of course, it seems like we just hung the national championship banners, and here we are again. But this pesky little NCAA investigation, or the two of them, have popped up again in the last week. Of course, we're taping on Thursday morning, so yesterday, Wednesday, the NCAA rolled out its penalties for Jim Harbaugh, and I think a lot of fans thought, wow, we knew something would happen, but they stuck it to him, and I don't know if it even matters, Aaron.
No, that's right. That's the question here, right? Or I guess the overarching thing. He got a 4-year show cause penalty, which includes a year of suspension, which basically makes him difficult to hire within the college realm for the next 4 years, to the end of 2027. But you got to remember, he signed a 5-year contract to become the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. So assuming he doesn't get fired there in the next couple of years, it's really not going to matter, I don't think, a whole lot. Nonetheless, it's obviously taken over the headlines nationally. It's what everyone wants to talk about in the college football world. I think we all knew this was some type of punishment was coming. It was just a matter of what. The NCAA was clearly, I thumbed through the entire 48-page ruling that the NCAA sent out yesterday, and it was clear in the language they used that they were bothered by Jim's failure to cooperate, or what they deemed as failure to cooperate. And that's really what stung him here. Had he just been upfront about it from the get-go, I think the punishment would have been probably lessened. In fact, Michigan probably wouldn't have been in a position to been forced to suspend him for the beginning of the season last year. But nonetheless, that's where we're at right now. He faces, if he were to come back to the college game before the end of 2027, he would be suspended for the first year, no matter what, and then the school that would hire him, if they did, they have to show proof to the NCAA that they're going to abide by this penalty and monitor him and the like.
Well, you're a good man. If you could wade through that 48 pages, I got started on it and said, forget it. I get the gist of it, but that's going to linger as a story for a long time, and I'm sure Jim and his family don't like what it does to their reputation. Not much they can do right now. Then on Sunday, ESPN reported on a draft of notices allegation for Michigan or against Michigan, which contains really a number of possible level 1 violations for noncompliance and recruiting. And this is what we refer to, I guess, more commonly as Signgate. Interesting timing, but it's out there, isn't it? At least one of the drafts is out there.
Yeah. This was another situation where we knew it was coming. We just didn't know when. And again, someone at the NCAA apparently leaked it to ESPN on Sunday. Haven't gotten clarity yet if Michigan's actually gotten a copy of it yet. But nonetheless, it is a draft, which means it's kind of a working, living document that the NCAA is working on. Eventually, at some point, they'll finalize a formal notice of allegations and issue it to Michigan. Michigan will be given the 90 days to respond, and then they'll go from there, whether decide whether to settle or move on or whatever the case may be. But it's more damning maybe for the university than anyone individually. Obviously, Connor Stallions is facing a potential level 1 violation. Jim Harbaugh, I believe, is facing a potential level 1 violation. Sherrone Moore is facing a level 2. He's probably the most relevant of the folks involved, just because he's still at Michigan and he's still the head coach. To me, the big story coming out of that is he was actually physically texting with Connor Stallions. There's a chain of, I think, 52 text messages that he apparently deleted the day that the allegations came out were made public. So that's something I think the NCAA is going to wade through. We don't know what the text messages said. We don't know if Sherrone actually knew what was going on. That still remains to be seen. Given Sherrone's past, and this goes for the school itself, Michigan as well, Sherrone was just hit with a level 2 violation with the recruiting violations that just wrapped up. So he's going to be deemed a quote unquote repeat offender, as will the university in of itself. So that could maximize the penalty here. When the NCAA sends out a notice of allegations, because I read through the one with the recruiting violations, at the end of it, they kind of list a series of mitigating factors and aggravating factors. So they can kind of pool together any previous run-ins with the NCAA and use that against you. So the fear here, I think, internally, and probably with the fan base, is Sherrone Moore could be slapped with a serious penalty if he's found in violation with the sign stealing stuff. So it remains to be seen. Obviously, Connor Stallions is no longer employed at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh is gone. Some of the staffers who were interns and the like, or maybe knew what was going on or were communicating with Connor behind the scenes, they're no longer employed either. So I think that the things that are still kind of standing out there is what will the NCAA do to Michigan with regards to sign stealing stuff, and then what will happen to Sherrone Moore.
Well, it's interesting with the Sherrone Moore text message thing, because there were 50 some odd text messages. The NCAA has had those messages for some time now, so you'd think if there was anything damning in there or anything linking him to sign stealing, they would have already talked about that. I think the more interesting thing is there in what non-compliance means in the NCAA world. From what I understand, when they asked for those text messages, Sherrone went to a third party because, hey, I bet he didn't trust the NCAA to mirror or image his phone. And that seems to be what the non-compliance is, going to a third party as opposed to going to them directly from what I understand. So when we read those terms, non-compliance, they have their own really crazy kind of interpretation, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, the NCAA is not a court of law. We're not operating under like laws here. These are the NCAA's rules. These are their interpretation of the rules. And they're basically judge, jury, and executioner in these situations, right? You saw what they did to Jim Harbaugh with the recruiting stuff for his non-compliance, and I think that's probably the fear with Sherrone Moore, is that they deemed him non-compliant in the situation, and you throw in the recruiting violations with him involved, like that, it could deem some type of penalty. So I don't expect a closure with this case anytime soon. As I mentioned, Michigan's going to get 3 months to respond. There's probably going to be a lot of back and forth. I expect Michigan will probably try and drag this out maybe as long as they can, just kind of like how they did with the recruiting stuff. Wouldn't surprise me at some point if they maybe preemptively, issue a suspension of Sharon like they did Jim last year. But we'll see. It's interesting when you read Sharon's contract he signed in January when he became the head coach. There is specific language in there for Michigan to, fire him for cause if they find him in trouble with the NCAA again. So it certainly opens a door for that to happen. There's obviously been no indication that is the plan moving forward, but you do wonder how much, athletic director Warren Manuel knew about Sharon's involvement with the sign stealing stuff and his communications with Connor Stallions when he decided to promote him. So that's going to be a storyline certainly we'll be watching here in the coming months.
Well, the ironic aspect of the story of the leak, to me anyway, is that, the NOA is focused on, and we saw this term used several times and places in the NOA, concerned with undermining the integrity of college football. But the draft was obviously leaked by someone at the NCAA, which in itself shows quite a lack of integrity, doesn't it?
Yeah, this whole case has kind of been extraordinary from the get-go in terms of the nature of the allegations, the situation at hand, the way the NCAA's handled this whole thing. It's been kind of out of character for them. A lot of things have been leaked to different media sources. You saw with the recruiting violations, Derek Crawford, vice president of enforcement of the NCAA, came out publicly and commented on it when they normally don't do that, and they even acknowledge as much that they don't usually come out and speak. So it's been a weird situation from the get-go. I think it's one of the reasons why Michigan's tried to shut up and not say anything publicly, because they don't want to make anything worse than it looks. But yeah, I mean, from a public standpoint, someone who maybe isn't intimately involved with Michigan or the program itself. I think if you stand out from outside of it and look at this whole thing, it kind of looks silly for every all of it. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing to follow. I don't know how the NCAA is going to operate here moving forward. They clearly were. I felt like a little out of bounds with the recruiting stuff. And we'll see where they go here, the sign stealing stuff.
Yeah, as you said, this is not going away anytime soon. So in the meantime, let's move our attention over to something much more interesting, which is the upcoming season. Practice started last week. This is the first full week, and of course the team is in pads. Coach Campbell said last week quarterbacks were taking snaps by seniority. At least that's how he was going to start things in camp. And I don't know, a lot of folks are hoping in the next week or two there is a starter or kind of a plan revealed for the first few games, but I don't think it's important as long as they know who they want under center. Do you?
Yeah, I do think whoever they end up going with, is going to, in a way, I think, dictate how the offense operates. You've really got three individuals who have different skill sets, maybe different strengths, and I do think, Kirk Campbell's prepared to kind of tailor the offense to that. Now, there are things they can do with all three, and Kirk's acknowledged that. They feel like they've got a solid run game. They're going to certainly use the tight ends. I certainly think whoever he ends up going with, and it's going to be a curious, interesting decision to make because I don't really think there's a clear-cut favorite here. You look at Alex Orji, and I think he's an interesting guy. I think the more dynamic of the three, just in terms of his running ability and what he can do outside the pocket. As we've seen, or maybe haven't seen, he hasn't thrown the ball a ton. And when he has, it hasn't been particularly impressive. So my understanding is he did spend the offseason working with a quarterbacks coach down south. He put a lot of time into his passing game. Early on, we've heard some pretty good things out of him from camp, but it is early. And as you said, they just got in the pad. So he's probably the front runner at this point. Jack Tuttle, I think, is probably the safe option here, just in terms of his experience. I mean, he's a seventh-year guy. He has started before at the Power 5 level. He started, 5 games at Indiana. He was technically the backup last year until he got injured, and that's kind of where things went south here, right? He didn't finish the year on the roster. He didn't practice in the spring, so Michigan didn't really get a good look at him. By all accounts, he's healthy and ready to go. And then Davis Warren's a name we've talked about for years, I feel like. We were talking to a player yesterday, Quentin Johnson, defensive back, and he said that from a passing perspective, he felt like Davis Warren's put together the best practice of camp when it comes to throwing the football. So if you're looking for someone to throw the football, and I think it goes back to the spring game. I thought Davis looked the best throwing the football there as well. But again, unproven, hasn't played a ton at the college level. And you don't know how he's going to fare in this big-time moment.
Well, on Sunday morning, Colston Loveland, Miles Hinton, Will Johnson, Ernest Hausman met with the media. Then yesterday you had a chance to see, as you mentioned, Quentin Johnson, Khalil Mullings, Josiah Stewart, and Tyler Morris. Anything interesting that you could glean or read in between the lines from those guys as far as what they think of the team so far?
Not a ton. It's more difficult early in camp because it's still very much a filling out process.
Yeah.
The defense is certainly still ahead of the offense, as we expected coming out of spring. I think that the offense is finally starting to find itself. And I'll be honest, I took probably more out of the players we spoke to yesterday, Wednesday, than I did those guys. Just based on, it sounds like in talking to Tyler Morris, the receiver, and talking to some of the defensive players, it sounds like the plan is to open the offense up a little more. At least that's what Kirk Campbell wants to do. I don't know if that signals anything to, he's where he's leaning with the quarterback position. But part of me wonders if they're going to try and throw the ball around the field a little bit more this year. We don't have Blake Corum, so we don't have that bona fide, maybe first and second down back. And again, unproven at the quarterback position. You've got an offensive line who I think is probably better in pass protection than they are run blocking at this point. That's kind of where I think things stand. Defensively, we've gotten a lot of coy from Wink Martindale and the players about how they plan to kind of interject some of the blitzing and some of the things he likes to do. So a lot of unknowns at this point. I think Michigan's trying to stay quiet for a reason. They know the defense is good, but they got some things to figure out offensively as well.
Yeah, this is a tough month. I always like to say August is a speculation month. We think we know how good this team is, but you're not sure until you tee it up. And I like to get each of my guests' thoughts this month, especially the beat writers, on how they see this team or what they expect. So, Aaron, starting with the offense, when you look at it and think about it before the season starts, what should the realistic expectations for them be this year as you see it?
That's a good question. I think they have the makings to be an explosive unit. If you look at some of the players they have, Donovan Edwards is a big play threat. Colston Loveland's a very good tight end catching the football. Samaj Morgan has the potential to break a big play at any moment. Tyler Morris really came on as the season went on last year and played very well in the Rose Bowl. You've got a lot of guys who I think beginning to find their stride, especially at the end of last year. The problem is the season ended and they stopped playing football. So you wonder how quickly they can pick that up this year. The offensive line, well, I don't think is as good maybe as previous years. I don't think is average either. I do think they're still going to be pretty good. Sherrone Moore is still helping to coach them. They've got an experienced group, a bunch of guys who have, like a couple of years ago, had kind of been around the program a while, but hadn't played a ton. They've just kind of been waiting their turn and biding their time. So I think the offensive line can hold up. I think they've got some explosive playmakers on the outside. It's going to come down to whether they can run the football, I think, in between the tackles and whether they can, find a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over and can be that steady, consistent leader.
Well, even with the unknowns and the question marks on the offensive side of the ball, plenty of talent there. It's just, you have to develop it and see what happens as the season progresses. But I think the good thing is, and the sensible thing, what Coach Campbell and the offense know is that with that defense, whatever they're going to do offensively, sling the ball around a little more than we think or be run-centric, that defense gives them the luxury to find their way and experiment, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the defense is going to keep them in games this year. They've got a lot of talent back at all three levels. It's very much the similar scheme as what Michigan's been running the last couple of years. I do expect it to be modified some with Wink at the helm. He does like to blitz a lot more. That's kind of his MO, and that's what he likes to do. But at the same token, I think he realizes that maybe they're going to have to dial it back some, and he's going to be a little more judicious in his decision making this year. But I think the talent level, top to bottom, is very good. You've got experience and depth really at all three levels. You've got some elite guys in the middle. You got experienced guys on the edge. You've got a deep secondary that I thought Michigan did a very good job of kind of replacing in the offseason. You had some injuries to like Rod Moore. You had some departures like Keon Sabb. And I thought Michigan did a very good job of backfilling those guys and bringing in more talent really than I think they needed to kind of fill in the holes there. So this defense is going to be very good. I expect it to be another top 10 unit this year. They'll probably keep them in games and get the offense to football. It's just going to matter of whether the offense can drive down the field, put together those time turning drives like Michigan has been so accustomed to doing the last couple of years.
If we're going to have those kind of clock churning drives and hang on to the ball for long periods of time, so it's going to start with Donovan Edwards. I think I'm excited to see him finally be sort of the man, aren't you?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think everyone saw what Donovan Edwards was capable of doing. You know, when he ran for almost 1,000 yards and had that big game against Ohio State. That's Donovan Edwards, Michigan recruited. That's
Yeah.
the guy I think they expected. You know, he had some struggles last year. He started the year, I think, still dealing with his leg injury. Then I think confidence issues took a hit when he wasn't able to kind of have those big moments and those big games that he himself thought. He put a lot of pressure on himself last year. I remember talking in the offseason, and he was saying how, you know, he wanted equal carry, he expected equal carries with Blake Corum. I think he wanted to try and match his production. He was talking about leaving the NFL after last year. None of that obviously happened. And it wasn't really until the national championship game where he kind of broke out and reminded people who he was. I think he's in a better headspace this year. He's spoken about it publicly. He's a little more mature and I think humble than he was last year. And I think that bodes well. He needs to, I think, prove that he can be an every down back. Last year, he had troubles doing that. I think for the reasons I explained. So, you know, I'm looking for him to have a big year, breakout year, especially early on this year, have some big games, especially against some of his non-conference opponents, and get him going. Because he's a guy who I think gets better with more carries and confidence. And he's certainly in a position to do that. I mean, they're going to seriously, you know, they're going to probably get him 15 to 20 carries a game, and he's certainly going to be the bell cow back.
The only question, and we'll see that answered, if anything, when Michigan observers say, well, Donovan Edwards, he's a home run hitter, no question about that. He's proven that. But between the tackles, you know, the second and third down runs, is he that kind of a guy? That's what we need to see this year.
Right, that's the question, and I think that's where the other backs come into play, like Khalil Mullings and Benjamin Hall. Those two guys are kind of more tailored to run between the tackles. And that's one of the reasons why I think maybe this Michigan offense may look a tad different than we've seen in previous years. I do think they're still going to be built in the ground game. They're going to still want to do things, you know, play that smash, physical style ball. But I do wonder if they're going to try and play a little bit more outside the tackles this year. That involves Donovan, both in the run game and the passing game, utilizing the tight ends and some of the slot receivers. But I do think that's the biggest area I think of growth for Donovan this year, right, is being better between the tackles. He says he's put on a few pounds this year. He's added weight and strength and the like. I think better position himself for that. But he's gonna have to do it on a week to week and a down to down basis, and we'll see if he can do it.
Well, another player I'm excited to see more of this year and how we use him is Colston Loveland. He's sort of teased us the last 2 years, and you say, wow, I'd like to see him get the ball in his hands more often. And it sounds like from what Coach Campbell says, they're going to get the ball in his hands more often, maybe use him more on the outside this year. So this could be, and it should be, a huge year for Colston, shouldn't it?
It should. You know, it wouldn't surprise me at all if I'm talking to you in, you know, end of October into November, and he's leading the team in receiving yards. Yeah. I expect him to be a big target for them. They're going to look to him a lot. Look, he's reliable. He doesn't drop the football a lot. He's a mismatch nightmare with opponents. He's difficult to cover. He's a fast kid. He knows where to be. He's smart. And he's experienced now. I mean, he's had some big moments in big games, so I think he knows what's expected of him. And the expectations are high. I mean, not only internally but externally. I mean, his name's coming up in a lot of the preseason stuff. You know, he's being considered as a preseason All-American. There's a lot going for him. He's a potential first-round pick in the NFL draft. So I expect Kirk Campbell and the offense to utilize him a ton. You know, if you go back into Kirk's past as an OC and head coach and some of maybe the smaller levels of football, you know, he likes using the tight ends. He made that known in the spring. That's kind of part of his MO. So I expect him to use Colston Loveland a ton. They're obviously going to use Max Burrison probably more in run blocking situations. But the name also we should probably be looking for as well is Marlon Klein, the sophomore tight end from Georgia by way of Germany. I mean, he by all accounts, he's one of the more athletic kids on the team, one of the fastest kids on the team. And it sounds like he's ready to play. So don't be surprised at all if you see kind of a resurgence of the two tight ends that Jim Harbaugh liked to use so much, and you see a lot of Colston Loveland and even Marlon Klein in the field this fall.
Well, just about everyone I talk to says, don't worry about the offensive line. They're going to be fine. I think they will be, but you never know how a new group is going to mesh together in the trenches or how long that's going to take, do you?
No, and I don't know if this Michigan offensive line has a depth that maybe they've had the last couple of years.
Right.
I think the initial 5 or 6 are fine. I mean, you've got a group with Miles Hinton at left tackle, very experienced. He knows what's expected of him. He played at Michigan last year. Josh Pree came in from Northwestern. Again, another experienced Big Ten guy. You still got a competition at center with Greg Crippen and Raheem Anderson. I expect Crippen to win the job, but you never say never. Right guard Giovanni Ohadi, again, another guy who's kind of been waiting in the wings. He's had some starts in the past. He's played quite a bit. Now he's going to get his opportunity. And the right tackle is a battle. I mean, we've heard Andrew Gentry's name thrown out there, Jeff Percy's name. Evan Link, a younger underclassman's name has come up as well. We're talking to Kurt Campbell last week. He felt like they probably have 6 or 7 offensive linemen they can lean on, which is good. It's a good start. But as we've seen the last couple of years, Michigan's had some injury woes up front. They've had to fill in some guys and make do there. And fortunately for them, especially last year, they felt like they had 9 or 10 guys they can lean on. This camp and this offseason kind of been about finding an additional couple of guys that they can kind of backfill in case of emergency.
Well, for the last few years, really, maybe for the last decade or so, this time of the year, what I hear from my listeners and our fans is, hey, we're worried about our receiving core, and they're always lamenting the lack of big-time receivers, game changers, guys that can go over the top. But, in the end, we've been pretty darn good. Their 2 guys went in the NFL draft from last year's wideout crew. Do you like this receiving core and the prospects we're going to see this year, Aaron?
It's an intriguing group. It's a group of guys who I think are waiting to break out, guys who I think are eager for their opportunity. Samaj Morgan just showed his big playability last year. I think there's a lot for him still to do. He's going to be a big part of this offense this year. Tyler Morris is a name who's come up quite a bit this offseason. The coaching staff have kind of urged him to speak up a little more and be a leader in the group, and I think he says he's ready to do it. And as I mentioned earlier, he kind of came on as the season wound down last year. So between those 2 guys, I expect them to kind of carry the load. You've got a group. Fred Moore's name has come up. He'll probably get quite a few targets as well. And then Michigan made an emphasis this offseason to kind of add some bigger bodied receivers. Maureen Walker is back after transferring to Ole Miss in the spring. And then they brought in C.J. Sarlson from Youngstown State, another big bodied, experienced guy. Didn't play at the FBS level, but he's been around a while, and Michigan showed that they can add guys from the FCS level and they can be successful. So they surely got the bodies, I think, in place there. They're in a better situation than they were in spring. But you're right. There's really been no, I guess, obvious number one here. In the past years there were, right, Roman Wilson and CJ, Cornelius Johnson last year. So it's going to be an interesting group to follow. They're a bunch of, I think, slot guys, which is, I think, intriguing to me because it's something we haven't seen a ton at Michigan the last couple of years. But they're waiting to find kind of that big body, reliable outside guy they can get the football to.
Yeah, so we'll watch that group this year. It's going to be fun. No lack of speed. A lot of people jokingly say we've got a room full of Smurfs, but Campbell's a really bright offensive coordinator. When you have speed kills, and you find a way to use it. So I think the thing I'm watching there is the Maureen Walker. I mean, he is that big-bodied receiver. And we've heard for, 2 years, of course, they moved him over to defense last year, but we've heard that he's just a freaky kind of an athlete, but it just hasn't come together yet. So that's one of those unknowns, and that could be huge if he does.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's one of the reasons why Jim decided to move him to DB, because he saw the potential in him. At that point, when they moved him, I think the receiver room was crowded, and I think you saw Jim realize which direction they were going to go with the offense, and it felt like he wasn't going to get a ton of touches there. So the athleticism is there. The ability is there. They just got to, he's got to put together, again, another guy who's got to put together on a regular basis. Just hasn't gotten a ton of targets, hasn't gotten a ton of experience playing receiver at the college level. We'll see what an offseason did for him. I think there's some quiet optimism about him. And we'll see if they can get him the football and he can make some plays.
Well, Aaron, we haven't talked a lot about the defense. I think it's because we just don't have as many questions about that unit that we expect to be not only good but elite. But if you do have any concerns right now on the defensive side of the ball, what pops to mind?
Lack of depth at the edge rusher. Remember, last year Michigan used 4 guys regularly. Like if you look at the snap counts, they're almost even. So while you had 2 guys are theoretically called starters, you really had 4 guys who split reps. That's probably not going to be the case this year. They're going to lean on Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore quite a bit. They were the backups last year, but they certainly had their moments and had big moments in big games. You just wonder who's going to backfill them. TJ Guy is a name that's come up quite a bit this spring. I think they're expecting him to take a leap this year, and we don't really know who the 4th guy is. So those edge rushers may be playing quite a bit, especially early on in the year. and you wonder what kind of toll that's going to take on them. Yeah, especially in the defense that's predicated, again with Wink at the helm of blitzing a little bit more and doing different things. Michigan was so successful defensively last year because they had so much depth at all three levels, and while they largely have that this year, edge rusher is my biggest concern.
One of the areas of concern I have, and again, it's not with that defense, it's the kicking game. Not punting. I'm very confident in Tommy Dolman. We know what kind of a stud kicker he is. We went out and picked up Dominic Zaveda, who has had a solid career so far, and he's going to compete with Adam Samaha, who had a really great high school career in Southern Michigan. You never know with kickers, so that's going to be a key and interesting position to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, I expect Zavada to probably get the job. I mean, typically when they bring in transfers like this, it's for a reason. Maybe they're not ready yet. They don't feel like Samaha's ready yet. Remember, they brought in James Turner last year from the portal, and he ended up winning the job. He was very good, very reliable. And I think they probably view Zavada the same way. He was very reliable from 40 and plus at Arkansas State. He was a finalist, I believe, for the kicking award at the end of the year. So I think they feel like they found their guy. Now, we're supposed to talk to special teams coordinator J.B. Brown this week, and we'll find out more on that. But I'm expecting Zavada to win the job. I mean, I'd be surprised if Michigan went to the portal, brought someone in who's proven and reliable, and didn't give him the job.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of questions with Team 145, as we know, and we'll start getting some of those answers in just about 3 weeks. One thing we do know is this schedule is going to be brutal and exciting. Even a great team might not be able to get through this unscathed. It's just going to be fun to watch, isn't it?
No doubt about it. For all the fans that were upset about the week non-conference schedules in years past, I think this makes up for it. You get Texas week 2 at the Big House, which should be great. I mean, when was the last time we saw an SEC school come up here and play? So I'm excited for it. I know the team's excited for it. And you're right. I don't think this is a year where Michigan's going to go 12-0. It would be very difficult. And if they did, it would be super impressive. The Big Ten's expanded, as we all know. There's some really good teams that came in the league with Oregon and USC's and the like. They're both on Michigan's schedule, as we know. Luckily, they get them both at home, which I think is helpful. And they do have to go to Washington. So this is a year where I think Michigan could theoretically go 9-3 or 10-2 and still be in the Big Ten title hunt. And certainly, with 2 losses, be in the playoff hunt. I think this is a year where you can afford a couple of losses and with the 12-team playoff, still get in. So I think on a yearly basis, you're going to see leagues like the Big Ten and the SEC get routinely, 3, maybe sometimes some years 4 teams in the playoff just by nature of the expansion.
Well, it's a brave new world and an exciting new world for all of we college football fans, especially we old timers. Things are changing once again, and it's going to be exciting. I mean, we wanted the 12-team playoff. We wanted the expanded Big Ten Conference, and you get what you ask for. It's going to be fun. With us today talking NCAA investigations and speculating about the upcoming season has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure having you on the show. Enjoy the rest of football camp, and once we get rolling into the season, we'll be sure to get you back.
Absolutely. Always glad to do it. Thanks much.
On Quick Hits today, receivers coach and passing game coordinator Ron Bellamy, along with special teams coach J.B. Brown, met with the media on Thursday. Bellamy had high praise for his group. He compared Tyler Morris to Ronnie Bell, who he spent 1 season playing with. He said he has no limitations as far as a ceiling and can do it all as a receiver. He loves where sophomore Kendrick Bell is in his development and praised Samaj Morgan, saying we can use him all over the field. He mentioned that Frederick Moore looks good and is competing to be a starter. Bellamy mentioned that Amorian Walker is back working hard at wide receiver and is a great fit. A reporter asked him why he's a good fit, and Bellamy said he's 6'4", fast, and athletic. So good news from the receiver room so far. J.B. Brown said the junior kicker Dominic Zaveda has done a great job at long field goals in practice, going 6 of 7 from 50-plus yards. He's also been very consistent from inside the 50. Brown said Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris, and Will Johnson are the 3 guys he's hoping to use on punt and kick returns. No injury news to report, which as we know, is always good. Don't forget to tell your Wolverine family and friends about the show, and join us next week as we're back with the latest news from practice and probably more chatter on what the NCAA is up to, especially if they release the NOA, which is rumored to be any day now. That does it for this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!